Frost for Way Out Radio. Welcome to the show. And you know, we do punk, reggae, ska, and we talk all about just amazing underground musicians from across the world, and bring to fruition different tracks you might not have heard of, and tell people stories. So today we're very privileged and lucky to have the amazing Terry Edwards on the show. So how are you, Terry?
Hello there, what a lovely introduction. I'm fine, thanks very much, yes.
Excellent. So he's a British musician. He plays the trumpet, he plays the sax, the guitar, keyboard, flugelhorn, and he's done so many amazing things in his career. He's worked with Madness, PJ Harvey, even Tom Waits and Nick Cave, is that right?
It is, yeah. The Tom Waits thing was a theatre show called The Black Rider, and so I did that at the Barbican in London, and then we went to San Francisco, Sydney Festival, and the show got revived in Los Angeles about a year after we first did it. So he took a couple of rehearsals, so I've not trod the boards with him, and I'm not on a record with him, but yes, I have worked with Tom Waits, yeah.
Wow. And then for you, are you a fan of his music as well? You've got some of his albums?
I am. That was a bit of a dream job, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, so I'd got kind of interviewed for it or auditioned for it, which, to be perfectly honest, not being too big-headed about it, I don't tend to do really, because people know what I do in the first place. So they don't really need to audition what they know what they're getting, you know. But yeah. I think they just had to go through the motions of doing that, and the musical director had sort of cherry-picked a band for it, but it still had to go through Mr. Waits. So yes, that was quite interesting. But no, that was really good. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about your birthday, because it's relevant to a new release you've got coming out. So you recently turned 60, so congratulations, happy birthday, hope you had a good one.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, well, you know, as good as it could be in the current circumstances, you know. Yeah,
did you have a few people over, or was it quite a small thing?
I had a very select, socially distanced 10 people in a big room in a pub. So yeah, it's all spaced out. But no, it was very good actually. Really, in a sense, it was kind of better because you could actually have a proper conversation with everyone than if you'd invited a million people from your past, you know. So no, it was very good, very nice. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So the new album, Very Terry Edwards, it's like 4 CDs, three actually. Sorry, and I've been listening to it. It's like everything's in there from the last 40 years, 60 tracks, loads of different musicians you've worked with, Lush, and then there's the covers. You've covered The Damned, New Rose, you've covered The Cure, even the Sex Pistols. I mean, wow, what body of work. Just tell me a bit about how you feel about putting that out right now.
Okay, well, actually, because of COVID, Record Store Day got delayed twice, as we know, and there's been a bit of muddying waters because I had a Record Store Day release due out for April, which had the Damned and all those covers on, and the 60th has some of them but not all of them. So I've actually got 2 records coming out in the space of a week when they should have been about 6 months apart. So it's very confusing for people like yourself to be to have like 80 tracks thrown at you, 20 off the vinyl and 60 off another release. But actually, lockdown really helped me put the record together, because I don't think I'd have found the time otherwise. It's hugely time consuming to phone your friends up and sort of ask favours to put tracks on things. There are quite a few holes in it. You know, there isn't a Madness track, there isn't Susie Sue or various other people that I played with over the years, because I felt that for something that's only got a really short pressing run, a major company wouldn't really entertain the idea of who the hell does this bloke think he is, wanting to, you know, get one of our tracks. So I had to do everything, you know, from the ground up, as it were, and everyone was just so lovely about it. You know, the Lush track, which you mentioned, 4AD were really great about it, the band themselves. And Franz Ferdinand, I just asked Alex if I could use the track that I was on, Always Ascending. And he said, yes, sure. Got in touch with his label, Domino, and they cleared it straight away. So it's been really life affirming that people appreciate the idea that, you know, there's this maverick bloke who could actually put 60 quite interesting tracks together over a career and celebrate a birthday that way. Wouldn't want to do it every year of my life, this kind of record. You know? it's quite a thing to do, but I'm dead chuffed with that. I'm really proud with it, actually. Proud of it. Yes.
Brilliant. Wicked. So yeah, there's 2 releases just for the listeners' sake. So there's Very Terry Edwards, which is the 60th birthday, 60 track celebration, and then there's another album which just came out, Stop Trying to Sell Me Back My Past, Volume 1. And so
that is.
Yeah,
that's the Record Store Day release, and that one's vinyl, and the Very Terry Edwards is CD. So 2 different formats as well. Too many things to get our head around. The vinyl one for Record Store Day is a reissue of the covers EPs that my first record under my own name, instead of being in a band or whatever. So that's the one that has the Mary Chain covers, the Fall covers, Miles Davis and the Cure covers, plus all the punk rock ones. And the title track was an outtake from my album on Ouija in the mid-90s.
Excellent.
So there we are.
Okay, so I started out by listing a few of the instruments you play. So you got the trumpet, flugelhorn, sax, guitar, keyboard. Is that the full list? And are there any other instruments to turn your hand to?
My midlife crisis instrument's the flute, actually. I got one when I was 50 to play with the Tindersticks, actually, because they had flute on a few of their albums they'd done for Claire Denis films. And when we did a tour of various film festivals and things, they just wanted to do a whole set of things that were part of Claire Denis movies. And the flute appeared in a few things, but only on about 3. And at first Stuart said, do you play the recorder? I know you play the recorder, but playing the recorder with rock bands is very difficult because there are lots of sharp keys. Now, I don't know if you ever played the damn thing at school or not, but you have to sort of put your fingers over half the hole to make sharps and things. So I just thought, well, the gauntlet's been thrown down. I'll try and learn the flute, which I could never get a note out of before when I tried. So I'm quite enjoying playing that for a bit, actually. There isn't too much else in the cupboard. There's a wonderful instrument called the marxophone, which is a bit like an auto harp and a zither, cross between an auto harp and a zither. So I've got one of them lurking upstairs in my music room, and that appears on the Near Jazz Experience Afloat album. In fact, the title track it appears on, I think.
Excellent. Yeah. So do you find that it's quite easy for you to turn your hand to multiple different instruments?
I think once you got the hang of the of music, yes, it's not too bad to actually find a way around some of them. Although I've never played any bowed strings, so violin, cello, those sorts of things are beyond me. And I love the violin, I really do, yes, but I've just never played it, and I think it's far too late to start.
Okay, so I'm going to go right back to 1982 now. You got a degree from the University of East Anglia in music, and that's where you became a founding member of the Higsons. Tell me about that time and what led up to this huge passion for music.
Well, yeah, I didn't really want to go to university. I wanted to be a pop star.
Yeah.
Yeah, why? And yeah, so I managed to do both things. I managed to get into a band whilst at university and get a degree. So I managed to keep all the plates in the air, plates spinning around. But that was there was an interesting intake of people around that time. I just seemed to be in the right place at the right time. The drummer, Simon, who was also in Near Jazz Experience, he like me, had taken a year off between school and going to university. But unlike me, he hadn't been just kicking his heels in a record shop wishing for stardom. He'd actually been on the road with Alex Harvey at the age of 18. That was what Simon had done. So clearly the best drummer I'd ever played with, because he was just so good and obviously match fit from that sort of playing. Charlie Higson's a couple of years older than us, and he'd already been in a band at the university there. Colin Williams was in an early incarnation of Wah Heat with Pete Wiley, and so he was the bass player. The original guitarist was Dave Cummings, and yeah, I think he played with Charlie. And then once he left, the main guitarist for most of our career was Stuart McGeekin, and he just brought a whole different feel to the band. So it was just we were just in the right place at the right time, I think, to get that band together.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What was on your record player at that time?
Well, it was just post-punk, really. So I was studying between 79 and 82. Ian Dury and the Blockheads was hugely important to me personally, because I just loved the sax player, Davey Payne. And so he, his style was really good. And he was a bit of a maverick in the way that he played. And of course, playing two saxophones at the same time for Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick was quite a thing. And seeing them live at that time was just astonishing, because there was the potty-mouthed Mr. Dury and probably the best band in the country at the time. And so you had a bunch of musos who didn't play like Pink Floyd or those sorts of musos, and this amazing sort of musical, lyrical poet genius type chap at the front, so that band was pretty important. But then all the punk stuff was important to us, the Damned and I guess the slightly post-punk Talking Heads. And then first time I saw the Lounge Lizards in '81, that was another thing that was really important. So all those things were around. I mean, if you just read the indie charts from 1980, 81, you'll hear what everyone that was trying to be in the band was listening to.
Yeah.
That's what you find stuff out instead of, because there was no internet, So that was what you did, and you listened to Peel and kind of tried to fight your way through it all.
Perfect. So tell me a bit about how you were introduced to Madness and how you ended up, writing music with them.
Well, after the Hicksons had split up, and we coincidentally split up, I think, at the same time as Madness, though I think they've been slightly more successful, hadn't they? No, I'd wanted to do some instrumental stuff which had double bass on it, and I simply didn't know any double bass players. I was never from the jazz side of the tracks, really, so I didn't know people who played double bass. And Dave Cummings, the aforementioned guitarist from the Hicksons, he'd got to know Mark Bedford and said, well, he's a double bassist and he's not doing anything at the moment. So yeah, we got together, and then we hit it off straight away. We liked the similar kinds of music, and we've got the same silly sense of humour. So it was great to just get on and work. And of course, I've worked with Mark ever since, on and off in various bits and pieces. For instance, when Madness did their first studio album after the comeback, wonderful. I did some horn arrangements on a few tracks on that. Again, luckily for me, the one that has Ian Dury guesting on vocals. So, so I even play on a record he sang on now, and I do dep with the Blockheads occasionally. So I do occasionally play with them. So it wasn't a silly thing to aspire to at the age of 18 to get a sax and try and play in the Blockheads, because these things can come true. So to go back to Madness, so I did that stuff with them, and with I guess with some of the solo things as well, because Lee Thompson got a ska orchestra together as well. So I played on the first album with them as well. I think I'm just I'm the right generation. I'm part of the family in a sense.
Yeah.
And I wrote the book about them as well. There's a 33 and a third book about the first Madness album.
Oh, which, wow, that's excellent. I wrote,
so,
cool. I'm working on it at the moment on Crass.
Oh yeah. Are you?
Yeah. Well, there's not one on Crass, so I think there should be. So I'm writing one. I've just interviewed Penny and Steve, so we'll see what happens.
Well, that's good. Congratulations. I think it's an interesting series, though, the 33 and a third. And also, I think similarly, I got my foot in the door there when you pitched to try and to write these things, was that considering how popular and how many records that band had sold, there's very, very few books around on the band, and I think that was kind of swayed it in my favour to be able to write it.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's really cool. So what about Spiritualized? Because that's like leaning more into the indie side of things. I mean, they're a massive band as well in their own right, but totally separate from Madness. Tell me about working with them.
Yeah, that came about actually through. I was playing with Gallon Drunk. I played on the From the Heart of Town album in '92, and then started. I was a member of the band from '93 and was touring with them a lot. And I think it was John Coxon who was involved with Spiritualized. Initially, it wasn't for a Spiritualized record. They were doing a Finny Tribe remix or something. He and Jason was doing that, and they knew that I played baritone sax, and they just wanted some noisy, squawking, squealing saxophone, which I did. And then when Ladies and Gentlemen came out, there's a track called The Individual, which was named after my tattoo. I have tattoo of individual down my neck, which I got at the age of 18, so that I'd never work in a bank and have to be a musician.
Right.
And so, yeah, they named the track after my tattoo. And there it is on Ladies and Gentlemen. And so I've played with them live since then as well, on when they've done the whole album, you know, track one to the end. And that's a great noise, you know, playing with a band with a large string section and horns and choir and everything. You really feel it. It's overwhelming. And what a great record that is.
Yeah, no, definitely amazing. And did you spend a lot of the 80s like living in London when you were like, have you spent a lot of your career based in London or?
A reasonable amount. What happened was we finished in Norwich in '82, but we hung around a little bit, sort of some of us coming back to London. I'm from Hornchurch in Essex originally, so I'm just on the outskirts. Not these days, but that's where I was from.
Yeah.
And actually, sadly, my father died very suddenly in '83, at the October '83. So I went back to stay with my mum for a year and a half, you know, while to get over that hideous sort of thing. But the Higsons were kind of in the middle, or we just sort of peaked probably, but we were still quite busy then. So I did a lot of commuting. And then a place came up in Whitechapel. So I've lived in Whitechapel since '85. So yeah, the second half of the '80s, I was, I've been in the East End, and I just love the city. It's fantastic. And of course, this is my cat Scarlet, who's just getting, this isn't very good radio if you're not watching this, of course, but yes, I'm holding my cat while I'm doing this interview. So yeah, and it's just got such a great music scene. You know, the city's got such a great music scene, and the people that I want to play with seem to hang around here, so that's always good.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to ask you about a couple more of the the artists you've worked with, which I found like really amazing. So obviously you've got Susie Sue down there from Susie and the Banshees.
Indeed, yeah.
I mean, she's quite hard to get hold of. As far as I know, we can't get her for an interview in Viva La Rock magazine.
Right.
Doesn't do it anymore.
No. I think that, the last time I did anything with her was actually Yoko Ono's Meltdown. And she guested on Double Fantasy, and I was in the band for Double Fantasy on Yoko's Meltdown. So that's the last time I saw her do something, which is 7 years ago now, is it?
Yeah, there must be.
Something like that. Mm. But my introduction to her was with the Creatures, when they'd just been touring with John Cale, and they were doing a couple of London shows, sadly without John Cale, because I'm a huge fan of his. But I was asked to do some horns for them. So they did a few Banshees things. So we did a version of The Passenger live with all the horn stuff. And,
oh, cool.
And a couple of other things. So I was known to Susie then, and then she was doing the solo album, Manta Ray.
Yeah.
And Steve Evans got in touch with me who was producing it, to go down and just play. I played on 4 tracks on the album. Here Comes This Day, I think, was a single, and there were and 3 other tracks, and that was really enjoyable session, really good music, and always interesting, I think. So yeah, I like what she does, but I think she was kind of brought out by she couldn't say no to Yoko's Meltdown, but I don't think she'd really been doing very much since the Manta Ray album.
Yeah. Okay. And Nick Cave as well. I mean, he's like an incredible musician and like somebody who's really prolific. So, what was that like?
Yeah, that was good. I played on a couple of things for the. I played on Lovely Creatures from the Murder Ballads album, and there was another track called The Ballad of Robert Moore and Betty Coltrane, which came out as a B-side of Where the Wild Roses Grow. And I was sickened to not have my name on the single, and they left off Blixers as well. So I think there was a bit of a mistake in the one or two typos. A few names got left off the credits on that record. Yeah. But sorry, to get the real issue is being on the record at all and doing it, which was again good. And I do like what he does, and he's got a huge work ethic, I think, and he's and he tends to do interesting things. He's one of those people who's got such a huge catalogue there that there's so much to dip into.
Yeah.
There was another thing we did with Gun and Drunk, with him singing on, which was a song called The Big Hurt, which was used for a film called Mojo.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
There is a soundtrack of it. It doesn't seem to crop up on any of his sort of compilation albums or anything, but you can get the soundtrack with that. And so there's an involvement there. The last time, I didn't play with him on stage, but I was playing with Nadine Shah, because I play for when Pete Wareham, her sax player, isn't available. I've played on a few things, which neatly ties into the very Terry Edwards record, because there is a picture, which I promise you is not photoshopped, on the front cover, which is me in a suit on a camel by the pyramids.
Yeah, that's good. Great.
And the only reason I was in Egypt at all was for Nadine Shah, because I was playing with her for a British Council gig. And we were there for less than 48 hours, I think, but we had to make the tourist pilgrimage down there.
Oh, excellent.
But previously, she'd supported Nick Cave in Berlin. I think it was the last time I saw him, which was just fantastic. 2 years ago, got to be, I suppose. Yeah. So, the Venn diagram crosses over in ridiculous ways.
Yeah, no, amazing. When I first saw that picture, it made me think of like Night Boat to Cairo, Mad. But then obviously it's got a whole nother story behind it, so that's really cool. So like in 1981, we go back a little bit, that was when the Higsons topped the charts, the indie charts, with their like punk funk kind of sound. Was there a bit of a scene around punk funk at that time? What do you think could have given it more momentum to become like more of a bigger scene, like maybe how the pub rock scene had a bunch of bands and like, that sort of thing?
It was quite dissipated. Actually, a lot of those pub rock venues were where we all played anyway. So there was pub rock, and then punk rock seemed to play the same venues. Yeah. And then punk funk things seemed to do that as well. And then you started getting the big pop stars of the 80s started happening, and this sort of kind of indie scene got put in the shadows a little bit. And I think a lot of it was to do with, we were pretty fiercely independent in many respects. So, in retrospect, you would actually get a decent producer to help you make your records, because what the hell do you know at the age of 20 about being in a recording studio, when you haven't had things like computers to learn them on at home. That was still quite an expensive domain, the studio, to do stuff. Cool. So I think when you go back and listen to those records, and there was a big scene apart from Norwich, there was another one in Bristol, and there was a different kind of scene in Scotland as well, and Liverpool again. And I think people were still listening to the same kinds of things. I think A Certain Ratio were probably the first band that made things quite, were doing that sort of interesting thing from this side of the pond. Obviously Talking Heads are similar, and there was another thing going on with James Chance and Contortions and those Defunct and those kinds of bands. But so it was happening, but I don't think it was very tied up.
Yeah.
In a similar way that, if you think that the Specials were coming up at the same time as Madness were, but totally unknown to one another, because they were 120 miles apart, Coventry and Camden,
Yeah.
But I think that probably was, that was the nature of the of just the time, you know, that people were interested in all these, lots of people in different places were interested in this, but we simply didn't join the dots.
Yeah, definitely. I think back at that time, and I suppose when I was younger as well, like in the 90s, it was normal for like school music departments to be full of kids like starting bands, and like just young people had that time and that creativity to do that. Like, I don't know if it happens as much anymore. I did a bit of work as a TA in a school, and there were literally no bands, and I just found that like a massive generational shift, you know.
Yeah, well, I think also because of the rise of DJs and rave culture,
Yeah,
because I think that maybe people were more interested in doing things as a turntablist or something rather than two guitars, bass, drums.
yeah,
That kind of didn't. The light of that is really the way that Britpop just sort of came up. So that was really a harking back to, well, 60s style instrumentation, but with 90s style production, wasn't it? I guess.
yeah,
And I think that made things a bit more popular. But I think the time you're talking about was certainly the period where I remember doing a tour with Spiria X, and it was 2 weeks, and there wasn't a gig on a Saturday night on either of the 2 weeks, and that was just astonishing to me because it was a sort of a college and university tour, but Saturday was DJ night, that was rave night, and it wasn't a band night. So at that point you knew that something had changed.
yeah, definitely. And I think it'll be interesting to see how well that kind of music ages, because if you listen back to the synth kind of pop of the 80s, it's aged terribly. Like some of it just sounds like of that era completely, whereas if you listen to like the Beatles or, you know, Bob Marley or a lot of bands from way before then, you're just like, that still stands a test of time today, and like sonically it sounds fresh. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if EDM music in 10 years just sounds, oh, that's so old now, you know?
Yeah, well, maybe. It could just be me, but I've never really liked the vocoder vocals when
Yeah,
it's sort of like Sparky Magic Piano, ELO, and anything that has those sort of
yeah,
kind of thing. And it's just all over pop music for the last 20 years, the
yeah,
auto tuning on vocals, because it just, you can't hear a personality in the vocal, you just hear the machine, to me.
yeah,
That's and I wonder if, hopefully, at some point it will date, but it doesn't seem to have so far. You know, it still seems to be very much in the forefront of the way that people record vocals on certain styles of music. But I think that's just going to become the Lindrum of its day. You know, that
yeah,
electronic drum that you sort of. I think it's just going to be considered to be so cheesy.
yeah, yeah. It's
Hopefully, in the
interesting.
not too distant future.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about Stop Trying to Sell Me Back My Past. So in 1991 you launched your solo career, and you released like a series of 4-track EPs full of covers. So that's where you've covered songs like New Rose, The Damned, and yeah, Bodies, Sex Pistols, Bride I'm in Love, The Cure, Jesus and Mary Chain, The Fall, Totally Wired. So yeah, just take me back to like how that idea came about and how you chose those kind of songs.
Okay. Well, the Mary Chain, and have actually played with
Yeah,
now since that record.
slam dunk that
Maybe that's how you get a career, kids. You cover somebody's tune that you really really love, and they might actually phone you up. No,
noted.
the idea um, with the Mary Chain was something that I tried before with a band called New York, New York, which was to play pub rock, rhythm and blues, but not have a guitar in it. You know, just take the main thing out. This experiment didn't really work very successfully, I do have to say. But I tried a similar notion with the Mary Chain, which was what happens if you take the guitars and the vocals away from the Mary Chain, which is all about guitars and vocals.
Yeah,
And there were some fantastic tunes left there. And instead of using guitar feedback, I used harmonics and squealing and squawking on saxophones to make the bed of feedback, and then put the put the melodies and the bass and basic rhythms, because the great thing about the Mary Chain is that they're so simple, but it's so difficult to make music that simple work, and to not put the stuff in that you want to put in. And it takes a real ear and a real precision to really, it's the wrong phrase, it's not dumb, it's really clever, but it is, that's the thing that seems to come across, is that it's, why is this so good and it's so simple? And I think that really worked, you know, with those Mary Chain covers. You just made it simple in a different way. You didn't try and make anything else clever. And I programmed the drums exactly the same as they were on the records, so that there was no other extra little fill or extra little bit anywhere. It was just straight down the line, and try and make it the way they would make it if they didn't use guitars and vocals. So that was the basis of that, and that experiment did work. You will hear a guitar on a couple of tracks, because if it didn't work, then I thought there's no point cutting off your nose to spite your face. But so that was that one. And then the Fall, this was around, the idea came to me around when they were doing cover versions themselves. So they had There's a Ghost in My House, Victoria.
Yeah, great.
And they would get in the lower regions of the charts. And I just thought, wouldn't it be great if somebody made a really commercial version of a Fall song? And I just liked the idea of doing ska versions of them.
Excellent.
And none of the, I mean, these things sound like I'm being willfully obscure or patronising, and I'm not, because I don't have the time to make music for a joke. I actually just thought it would sound really good, and I do love the Fall and the Mary Chain and
definitely
Miles Davis and the Cure, you know, that, and I think hopefully that comes across in the music. It's just that you can either do a straight cover, and there's nothing wrong with doing straight covers, because if the song's good, the song's good, and if you want to sing it, then sing it. You know, like Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Don't put a red nose on it, you know, just play it as a rock song. But I just wanted to do something interesting with those other tunes, and I like the idea of kind of making commercial versions of the Fall, and then the idea of doing speed metal versions of Miles Davis tunes and doing a string quartet version of New Rose by the Damned really came out of that New York school of John Zorn and Kronos Quartet. I think they're West Coast actually, but that interesting way of just looking at something, looking through a glass differently rather than darkly, you know. So that and I think that kind of, I don't do too many of them these days, do I? I do still do cover versions, but those were specific 4-track EPs, again, because the format of just vinyl was a 12-inch single. Was great for just having the 4 ideas, putting them out, 4 A-sides as opposed to an A-side and a B-side or whatever.
And Marky Smith was like quite impressed with your ska version of Totally Wired, was he?
The only one of the 4 he didn't like was Container Drivers, probably because I took all of the lyrics off it.
That sounds great, actually.
I do as well, yeah. Apparently, but he wasn't too. I think it's probably too muso for him. But that was great fun. It was just a great bunch of musicians who liked the idea and came, you know, just brought everything to the party. There's I don't know if you're going to be playing any of these, but on Container Drivers, it's a very long track. There's a fade out towards the end, and then it fades back in. That was completely played and natural. That wasn't us bringing the volume down on the desk or anything. We actually played it like that.
Nice.
In the studio.
Yeah.
I think it just comes across. You know, I don't think we took it twice. I think that's it. It's a live version of that.
Yeah, I've been writing some music on my own lately, and I've been listening to certain like instrumental tracks like Sandstorm by Darude, which is like a iconic techno track, and songs like that really take use of dynamics. And you know, to make a good danceable track, I think you really need to pull back the reins and let them go, and pull back the reins and let them go. Like that's just what people love, isn't it? They just go mad for it.
It is, and I think it's done with filters, isn't it? Where you just filter out all of the bass. It has the same effect, you know, as dynamics in terms of volume, but just in terms of tonalities, it does it, doesn't it? You know, the way you just have the treble twittering away for a little bit, and then you just kick in all the bass, don't you? And then it makes sense again. You know?
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to ask you specifically about the New Rose cover. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but obviously that was like, it's noted as the first punk single because that was like 1976, and you've changed it a lot because you've used like instruments which I would say would naturally be quite slow instruments, like, you know, strings and cello and violin, it sort of sounds like, but you've chosen like a massively upbeat punk song. So give us a bit of insight on that.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, the two things before, the Kronos Quartet, they've always championed 20th century and now 21st century new compositions, but they had somebody arrange a Jimi Hendrix tune for them, which sounded pretty amazing. And then another one that John Zorn wrote for them, which just had them swishing their bows and not touching the strings at all. So the idea of doing something punk rock with a string quartet and doing it as fast as that kind of appealed. And again, I think that the reason I do some of these things is that the melody is so strong, and if you know the lyrics, it's good anyway, because you can sing them in your head or out loud if you wish. But I think that if the melodies are there and the intent is there, you can actually make the instrumentation of it push through and makes you listen to it in another way. New Rose is quite an interesting tune because the received wisdom is that punk rock was stupid people who could only play three chords, or even better, couldn't play the three chords they were trying to play. Now, this wasn't remotely true of the Damned, and I think there's at least 10 chords in the song. It's a really involved tune. It's very fast, so it's very short, and they pack a lot in a short space of time. And it actually worked very well on strings, I think. I went to a thing at the Dublin Castle, the the rock and roll book club that they do, and there was a Brian James book that had come out, so he was there, and I slipped a copy of that record to the DJ to play, and of course people's ears started pricking up and think, I do know this, you know. And I'd copied some of the guitar lines on it. So there are a few little answering phrases on guitar, like guitar solo-y bits in it, and they come out on the first violin bit as well. So it was studiously copied, you know. So am I rambling now, or have you heard what you wanted to hear about the Damned? Yeah, I love them as well. They were the band that kicked off punk rock for me. I found them more interesting than Clash and the Pistols because of the speed more than anything. Nothing had been that fast before, and then trying to keep up with playing songs with them was pretty astonishing.
Excellent.
So there you go. I'm a child of punk. What can I say?
Right on. I really enjoyed their Night of 1,000 Vampires, which was just about 6 months ago. That was really cool. The Damned got the whole audience to dress as vampires, and they did this quite theatrical thing. So crazy. Right. Yeah, it was fun. So you said at 18 that you could never comprehend making it to age 60. So I just wanted to ask, have you lived dangerously, and did you have any like hairy moments throughout the years where you thought you might not make it?
Not really, no. The occasional aeroplane trip that's in a thunderstorm, you know. The Hickson's van went over once. That was quite, and ended up on its side facing the wrong way on an A road as opposed to a motorway, thankfully. So I guess that was a bit hairy, but it wasn't necessarily, although we were going to a gig, it's not really rock induced. I think that's just life, isn't it? I haven't had any more life-threatening experiences than anybody else who's made it as far as 60, I don't think.
You hear some mad stories. So Kane FM, the radio station we're on now, is really like community based, and we like taking ears off the mainstream and giving it back to the community. And so we've got a lot of younger listeners who are like aspiring musicians. So do you have any advice for people who might want to move into this industry at a time when it's going to be tough?
Well, I think you've got to like doing it, really. I was asked this not that long ago, sort of, how do you become a session musician? I didn't want to be a session musician. You don't aspire to, you don't sort of go into the job centre saying you wanted to be a session musician.
Yeah.
You go into the job centre saying, no, I can't sweep roads because I'm going to be the lead guitarist in a really good band. You know, you don't actually sort of, I don't think that you come to doing what I do as a career choice initially. But I think that the way it's worked out is that it was obvious that the way I was going to keep making music was by playing a lot of different instruments and having a good pair of ears. Have a listen to everything. And I think that if somebody randomly asks if you can play on something of theirs, we're talking real basic level here. We're not talking somebody who's going to exploit you for money or anything. Just sort of just someone going, hey mate, do you want to play on this track? Don't know if it's even going to go anywhere. And even if it's not something that you like, I think you should always do it.
Yeah.
You know, don't do anything that's like pulling nails out of your fingers or anything, but do just do things because you never know what's going to inform the next thing that you do. And no two songwriters that are any good are actually the same. And people write songs in a different way. And so you learn a lot more about harmonies and lyrics and how people scan songs and things by just working with them. It was funny to as you mentioned PJ Harvey earlier, I think, and I did the last tour, and there were a couple of tunes from the back catalogue that we did, and John Parrish was saying I couldn't understand why Polly didn't. I was playing the drums on it, and she wanted it to be simpler and simpler and simpler. And what he realised was that they didn't both see the beginning of the bar as being exactly in the same place. And I don't mean by a small amount. I mean, Polly tends to think that the downbeat is where the vocal comes in.
Yeah.
I know everything. So everything is quite vocal led. And sometimes if you're a guitarist who chugs away on chords, you don't necessarily think that way. And I think it's always the best thing you can do as a musician is to, sure, be opinionated and have your own opinion about everything, but get inside somebody else's head, get inside another songwriter's and think, I love that song. Why on earth did they put that chord there? Yeah. Let's work it out. Let's just try and do it. And not from an academic point of view, from a musical point of view, you know?
Yeah.
The best things that are in weird time signatures are the ones that you don't notice that they're in weird time signatures until you sort of go, hang on a minute. The ones where you immediately start going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and counting it to yourself, they're the clever ones. They're not the ones that make it roll.
Yeah.
You know? So I just think, have a listen to, and there's so much to listen to. You know, I know there's it's a bit contentious. Spotify can be contentious because it doesn't earn any of us any money.
Yeah.
It's a great way of me not buying loads of records that I just want to listen to once, and you can just listen to a few things, and you can just. I always loved the iPod for just the random button. You could just hit the random button and just get whatever was coming up, and listen to the radio. Listen just whatever station, and this is a good radio station to start with. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's good, you know, because you're not just listening to the same things all the time. You can, and if you're an instrumentalist, maybe just play along with it and think, I may never play this again, but I might just learn that note going after that note sounds quite interesting.
Definitely, and like you said about radio, I mean, I've been to a lot of studios in England and in different countries, and it's industry standard now for somebody to sit in front of a computer and it's mixing the tracks for them or blending them, and they're not even choosing the playlist, and they're just like, oh, this song comes on twice an hour, this song comes on once every 2 hours, and they're just like known as a DJ, but they're actually just talking. And well, with our station, we're literally DJs with vinyl, and like a lot of us are just like mixing live. So I think we should bring that back.
I think that's a very good thing, and there's some great ones out. Boogaloo as well. That's another great radio station.
Definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for talking to me, and it's been a pleasure. And just let everybody know what else you'll be up to later this year, and where they can get your records.
Okay, well, who knows where we're going to be? Who knows what they're going to close down or open up again next? But Record Store Day, I think, is still important. It's been to the far end of August now, and I think you can go online, which isn't always the idea behind it. But of course, COVID, that has to be done.
Yeah.
And I guess they're not doing any live things for Record Store Day because the last couple of years, Near Jazz Experience has gone to the South Coast and played 2 or 3 different record shops. So I would be playing various things at a record store to promote Stop Trying to Sell Me Back My Past Volume 1. But you should be able to get that through your local stores first and foremost. There is a Sartorial Records, that's my label, Bandcamp, and once the initial weekend of Record Store Day is gone, if there are some copies available, there might be, you can get it through my Bandcamp, Sartorial Records. And similarly, with the CD, the 3 CD set, Terry Edwards, that would be on the same format, on the same platform rather. But yeah, I always think it's nice to go to the record shop and have a chat with whoever's there.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it's like the radio station. You just want it to be done by a human being, don't you? Not someone who's just going to shove the thing he's been sent in the window and hope it sells.
Yeah, I mean, recently.
And what else am I doing? Yeah, sorry, the New Jersey will be doing some more gigs at wherever we can, depending on how things get opened up. And I'm supposed to be doing a thing at Pizza Express in Holborn, if that's still happening, 30th of September, with Alexis Taylor of Hot Chip and 2 or 3 other musicians play beyond the years and around that period. So the usual mishmash of stuff, Paula, that's what I should be doing.
Excellent, okay. So, that's very Terry Edwards and Stop Trying to Sell Me Back My Past. That one's out now, and you can get those at your local record store for Record Store Day, and you can check them out on Bandcamp as well. So thank you so much for talking to us, Terry. It's absolutely just been a real pleasure and really interesting life story you've got there, and thank you so much for the music.
Thank you. Likewise to you, and goodbye from Scarlett.
Scarlett, the cat.